Good morning, everyone. Kate Bohr and Fiona Pearman joining you for this week's Facebook Live, where we continue to talk about perfectionism. And this week, we want to talk about why it's a problem. I think naturally, all the things that we do well, our strengths, have gotten us to this place, often successfully in context of our career. But our ability to start to perhaps look at perfectionism in context of ourselves, the purpose of perfectionism, what it is costing us individually, but equally importantly, what it's also costing our organisations.
Yeah, I think there's some big pieces to dig into here. If you identify with perfectionistic traits, you will find it really hard to let go. Like it's something that is part of who you are. Our identity rests on it. We want to be seen as doing things incredibly well. And there's an important piece to examine here about how much is this tied up in my identity, my sense of myself, actually my ego, rather than what's actually necessary, what's actually appropriate in terms of outcomes. And I think the willingness to unpack what's necessary versus the perfect, everything done in every situation actually is it's an important process, but we need to be willing to give it a little bit of space and time, because our brains are hooked into there only being one way, that we must do it in a certain way. And so we're going to be challenging some very deeply entrenched thought patterns and beliefs about what's required.
Yeah, I think for many of us, we're not even critically thinking about what's required, particularly if we've got deep subject matter expertise and experience in something. We just have a way with which we do things. And so often that's a default assumptions around what done looks like, what good looks like. And so the big challenge here is often it's not recognized and it's not necessary. And so we want to be able to ensure that your time, energy, and resources is in service of you, in service of the organisation, in service of where you want to head professionally, that you are making a contribution that is recognised. And so, broadly, the cost of this is time spent doing things that is of no value to you, or low value, I think is the important piece. No value or low value to you and the organisation. The energy of taking something from, a 7 out of 10 to a, 10, or in many cases, a 12 out of 10. And importantly, the other work, the opportunities that we may be exposed to if we weren't doing that low value or no value work, the opportunity cost of what else we could be exposed to, experienced in that space.
Yeah, I was having some conversations yesterday with some amazing women who are doing great work, and they are noticing they are missing out on opportunities because they are so hooked into and they're so oriented towards having to get everything right, dotting every I, crossing every T. And they're starting to see that other people are progressing past them because they're not so hooked into that. I think when we start to look at why this is a problem, particularly for individuals, what plays out, there's a couple of things that it's good to be aware of. One of the big ones is, and we hear this often in leadership programs, it's often one of the reasons people come into our Acts of Confidence program, because they're finding it so hard to delegate effectively. There's a whole lot of pieces that are going on for them about trusting someone else to do it at the standard that I do it. They become a bottleneck because they're over-checking everything that's done by others. And there's a big price here in terms of growing and developing the talent of others. They're not getting opportunities if we're not delegating, because we're so worried about it not being done a certain way. That it has a big cost for us and the people around us.
Yeah, I think there's another piece here around what we're willing to put our hat in the ring for, right? If our standard or our expectations is that it needs to be a 10 out of 10 before we're willing to have a go, before we're willing to put our hat in the ring, then there's a whole ton of opportunities that we're not putting our hat in the ring for, we're not being considered for, that we're not exposing ourselves to because we're not ready yet. And this has implications on not only outcomes for organisations, it has implications on innovation, it has implications on risk for organisations. The ripple effect of, having that bar too high in terms of where we're willing to step in, where we're willing to take a risk, is really significant.
Yeah, I think noticing yourself, where are the places where I'm extending probably too much control, where I'm super vigilant around this, can be good places to start to examine and maybe be a bit more discerning. And this piece around the broader systemic or organizational impact is really, really profound, because if we've got 20 or 30 perfectionists doing things in this way and running their teams in that way, it's going to be a super ineffective way of resource allocation. Lots of opportunities are going to be missed because we're going to be playing it safe and small and too scared about what's going on. And then other people are going to think, well, I can't delegate, or I need to control things as tightly as they are because that's what that leader is doing. So there's some really negative consequences going on all around as we dig into this.
Yeah, I think the role modeling piece is really important here, because if we're setting standards too high or unnecessarily high, I think that's the critical reframe here, for ourselves and then for our teams, then our people are going to follow that. And what we know, is that we can probably all look at the work that we're doing. And there's probably at least 10 or 20% of things that, we could look at and either stop doing or delegate down. And so that has a really important impact on the effectiveness of organisational wide resource. But I think the other really important piece when I think about this is work health, safety and wellbeing and burnout. We know that for most people, what they have capacity to do and what's expected of them is there's a big gap between that, right? And so they're spending significant hours doing what in some cases is unnecessary work. And to be able to have those conversations, to right-size those expectations, and then for leaders and employees to close that gap between what is necessary and what is being done is really valuable when we think about, overall workforce efficiency, talent retention, and of course, employee work health safety. Team, we're going to leave it there. If you've enjoyed today's confidence conversation, we'd love to hear from you. Of course, if you know someone who would benefit from what we've shared today, we'd also love for you to share that with them, whether that's at this Facebook video, or you, of course, can share our YouTube link. And even when you're ready to go deeper with your relationship with Core Confidence, head over to our website, coreconfidence.com.au.